Okay. It's a great honor to be here. I'll put this in my pocket. Oh, there is my iPhone, sorry. Put that over there. Okay. Yeah, my father was invited here already, now it's more than a year ago, I think. And in January, the year before he passed away, he was canceling 65 lectures, which he had for 1 year. He loved lecturing, and he went all over the place. And it was a very sad moment for him, and he personally called everybody who had booked him to say, sorry, this has happened. And even journalists who were inviting got a phone call, and it was amazing how nobody leaked the diagnosis. So he got a pancreas cancer, and he learned about it 1 year before he passed away. And we thought that he would only live for maybe 4 or 6 weeks. And instead he lived for 1 year. So when the big crisis in our family was there when he got the diagnosis, and for him as well, it was a very desperate moment. But then he survived for 1 year, and that is the experience of living with death closer to you is in some sense good, because you realize that we are all mortal, and we have to take every day as a gift. So for 1 year, we finished writing the book that we are now, after he passed away, me and my wife Anna has been completing the visualizations and the chapters, etc. So it will be published in April in 24 languages, and we're gonna show there the ignorance results from our measures. And the whole book is about humility, how to be humble about how difficult it is to keep track of facts. The book is called Factfulness, and that is similar to mindfulness, that it's a relaxing habit of actually only carrying facts that you have supporting evidence for. It's very relaxing to not have opinions without facts, because no one will confront you and you stand there naked saying, oh, I don't know, I just believe this thing, you know, that someone told me since I was a kid, but I never checked it. Instead you say, oh, I'm probably wrong because I've been wrong about most things. A quite new lifestyle in a world where facts are available. So suddenly people can prove you wrong. So we need another mindset. So we're trying to design that mindset and live that mindset. And that is, I welcome you all to join that mission, because the only good thing to do when Hans passed away is to carry on his legacy. And it's actually quite easy, because the ignorance out there is enormous. And it's really, really fun to disclose it. Also in this room there is ignorance. I will show you, because I tested your knowledge. So I dropped out of university. Being a son of a professor, that's easy to do, because we came up with the animating bubble charts, and I was studying economic history and arts and theater and stuff like that. And then it's actually my wife and my father and me, we founded Gapminder out of family relations, where you cut over disciplines in universities much easier, because you can say frankly what you think about the other idiot, and you're still family, so you won't like walk two different paths. So that's probably the reason why we did this as a family. It's way easier to confront the disciplinary silo thinking. Then we sold the software to Google, because my brilliant wife, she's really the user experience of the three of us who have carved out a new way of communicating. She said people will not go to the Statistics Sweden website. They go to Google, they search, they find an outdated PDF file about crimes in Stockholm, and they think that's the most recent number. Meanwhile, we have new, fresh data in the Statistics Sweden website. So let's create a link between the official websites where the data is. There is roughly more than one good source for fatality, battle deaths in crime, in war in the world. So we better hook Google to the reliable source. That's not usually how Google works. So for 3 years we worked basically they have a page rank which gives the high ranking to very popular articles, often very sensational and terrible things, which make it hard to find statistics, because you search and you just find those extraordinary news about the statistics. So that's what we did at Google for 3 years, and then I started crying. Because people don't search for statistics in the first place. So even if I create the best technology, people don't go look for facts that disconfirm their beliefs at all. Like most people don't. So we dropped out of Google and came back to Hans and Gapminder and decided to develop school material, to actually go search for people instead of waiting for them to search for the data. Now Gapminder is a bigger foundation in Stockholm. We got like 10 employees. We are a non-profit. Not ideologically, but strategically, to be reliable. We have no economic interest, and we're a fact tank, like has been mentioned. I have to go into the learning now. So I'm going to move away from describing the context. Let's start with this chart showing two kinds of countries. Every bubble is a country. You might have seen something similar before. The big ones, that's China, that would be India, okay? We have small families over here, can you see? 3 or 2 children per woman. I got 3 babies at home. And over here, these countries have 6 or 7 children per woman. On this axis, we see how many children die. Here we can see many children die in the big families. And on this side, few children die in the small families. This is a divided world, 2 kinds of countries. Can you see? Very fascinating. It's easy to understand. It's the developing world. And this is Norway and Sweden in the developed world. We're ahead of everyone else, and we got the nice and fancy universities, and they got problems. Okay, a very simple world. This is what the world looked like in 1965. Okay, that's a long time ago. I was born in 1975. Okay, the world had already started to change by then. But it's such a simple world. Look at what happened with this picture if we now push play and see how, this is a high speed because I got many slides to show you. Okay. You can see how the whole world has changed. Today it looks like this. Okay? There are hardly any countries left there. If we look at the boxes again, this is what the world looks like today. You see? There is hardly one country up on these levels. There are few left, and they are all moving down to this corner. The whole world is now in the developed box in terms of family size and child mortality. So the world has changed, but when we check people's mindset, for example, this question, is the majority reached by modern healthcare, modern medicine? That's what the question is about, right? Did the children get vaccinated? Are they in contact with modern medicine, yes or no? I asked this question in this room. This is the correct data, official WHO data. It's some vaccine, so at least one, usually it's measles, the first shot of measles, which gives like 95% immunization. 88% of the children in the world today are vaccinated, okay? That's almost everybody. It is part of a global public health network, which works. It used to be 22% back in the 80s, so this is revolutionary. This is the correct answer. We rounded it downwards to be sure that we're not outside the uncertainty range. We're definitely on the right side. And then you got 2 other alternatives. All the questions we ask are A, B, C. So the big difference between them is important. If you pick 20, you believe that a minority of children have access to modern medicine. You can't really see any slides from there, right? Can we just remove these papers and they sit here instead? I guess that would be much better for them. Because the papers don't really learn. Okay? Oh, great, thank you. Feel free to occupy the reserved seats. So we asked this question in 12 countries. And last week we asked it in Norway as well. So first the other 12 countries, look who won. The winner is Sweden. 21% scored correctly on this question. They know that 80% are reached by modern medicine. In Germany they have kind of a problem with 6% only scoring correctly. That's very unfortunate for the Germans. And Japan as well, and France as well, and Spain as well have a huge knowledge problem when it comes to global health, right? They seem to not know about the progress. So we went to the monkey house in Stockholm and asked them, and 33% of the monkeys picked the right answer if you got A, B, C. There was not one country that scored better than chimpanzees, okay? So that's why I say this is fun. This is a really enjoyable thing to do. Public education has not happened, and it's fun to be the first to do it in global. I mean, people talk about vaccination all the time, like the Gates Foundation. They speak to the public and say, we're going to vaccinate the children. But then if the public think it's only 20% who were vaccinated already, they believe they're going to do this job. 80% are going to be vaccinated. No, they're only going to reach the missing 12%. That's kind of doable, right? Obviously, they know how to do it. So we asked this also at news conferences to ask the journalists what they thought. This is the Europe's public broadcasting news agencies meeting in Morocco on their yearly conference, very fancy conference. 6% of them picked the right answer. And this is a very important message, that if this is true, if the journalists, I mean, we need to test their knowledge before we blame them for lying to the public. It's not lying if you are absolutely wrong yourself. Then it's not lying, it's unintentional misinformation. And that's what I think it is. That's why the blame game of fake news is absolutely exaggerated. I think it's an absolutely wrong problem to solve. Of course it should be solved, but it's a difficult problem. This misconception is not driven by fake news in any sense. It's just unfortunate. And I think I can answer more or less what 94% of the journalists in public broadcasting in Europe are absolutely wrong about vaccination in the world. And that's just 1 out of 12 questions we've been asking where people score systematically worse than random. The factual filmmakers have also a very fancy conference, and we were invited because we entertain. So we get invited, and then we can test the audience before the conference. And they scored, these are the people who decide what documentaries to do in Discovery Channel, National Geographic, PBS, all these documentary filmmakers. They call themselves the factual filmmakers. That's the name of their conference. But they forgot to test the facts, you know. So yes, the intention is nice, you know, but they do shark films and crime films and stuff like that. Really good filmmakers. And then I went to the World Health Summit. This is like last week in Berlin, the World Health Summit. You know what it is? Yeah, public health people know. It's where the politicians meet policymakers and clinicians and researchers, and they talk about public health and other health, etc. So they were much better. Look, they were even better than Sweden. They came almost up to the level of the chimpanzees, right? The experts of the world. Great, better than anyone else. Not better than chimps, of course. So I showed this to them, and the whole room turned silent. They didn't know how to laugh about this. It wasn't fun at all. Everyone else laughs, but this is like, you come to the experts and show that they don't know their own field of expertise. Nobody laughs. It's not fun. So the chimpanzees again, but no. Now let's look at Norway. So is Norway beating the health experts? No, you're better than US. You're a second place actually, after Sweden, with these new numbers from last week. So the goal here is, who in Norway can help me? I'm meeting Prince Haakon tomorrow. He's actually a Gapminder fan, so he invited me to his conference, which was also one of the conferences my father had said no to. So the goal is, how can we collaborate to actually bring this green bar up here somewhere? That is the question. So 5 years from now, what are the methods that will actually work? Can we go out to bars and lecture? How many are we in this room, if we do it all of us? This is a major challenge to actually reach out with knowledge. Like, what channels do we have? What can we do on social media? I don't have very simple answers to it, but we need to understand the problem. Okay? In this room, now you're going to see your results. I think you've seen some of Hans's videos. This is outstanding. Better than the World Health Summit, you see? And almost, even better, I think, than Stockholm University, where I was last month. This is a very good result. 48% of you live in a world where half of the children don't get vaccines, or 20% get vaccines. So probably there is some need for this teaching in this audience as well. This is from like very fancy conferences, like this one, for example, the Lindau Nobel meeting, where the Nobel laureates in medicine meet young researchers in biomedicine. And this is one of the 5 largest banks. The worst result we ever measured on this question. 4% correct. They invest the money, you know. So basically, you sit with money and you're going to look for industry potential growth. And you have a distorted worldview where you're, like most people in the room, believe that part of the world, you know, Africa, nothing has happened, nothing has changed. Do you think investment money goes there then? That's why we think it's devastating ignorance, because it directs money wrongly. The World Economic Forum, where Hans asked this question, 18% scored correctly, and the Nobel laureates in medicine, 8%. Okay, so you're a Nobel laureate in medicine. You're the best, right? There is no one else who's better in your specific little field, right? So you go out in the mass media and you talk about public health maybe, which you have done no research in whatsoever. And you're actually worse than the Swedish public, you're worse than most other publics in the neighboring field where you thought you could extend your knowledge from your academic field to at least the neighboring corridor, because you heard next to the coffee machine that they talk about vaccination or something, you know. Absolutely not. That's not how facts work. You cannot extend them. You cannot extend something you know from here to there. It just doesn't work. And we need to learn this and realize this because we believe we know things that we can extend. Okay. The first mega misconception, it says number 2, it should say 1. We're fighting 3 mega misconceptions. This is the first one. The idea of a divided world where the majority are down on a lower level than they are, and we, the rich, are up there, like the colonial world, like England and US and Sweden, and these are the poor colonies, right? That mindset is outdated and need to change. Basically, the errors on our fact questions, we think are driven by these 3 mega misconceptions. Just to simplify it, I'm going to go through them one by one. This was the first one, the world is divided. We made the World Bank aware of this, and they finally blogged on their website saying, no, we shall never use the word developing countries again in none of our communication. Public blog. Thanks, Ola Rosling and Gapminder, for showing us that this is no longer what the world looks like. Official statement from the World Bank when they realized, we're wrong, this terminology is misleading. And the CNN picked up the story, etc. So when you do public education, yes, you can have an impact and outreach, but you probably will have to make people laugh, even at the World Health Summit. So I'm going to figure out a way to have them laugh at their own ignorance. I don't know exactly how to do it yet, but whatever. If we look at the relevance of this, the global burden of disease, you can have great data accessible freely online. If we instead think of it as suffering, this is the global picture. What are people suffering from throughout their lives? Not what kills them, but their suffering. 61% of suffering on this world is from non-communicable diseases. 28% is from communicable. And then you got injuries. This is the total suffering of mankind, at least physical. Then, no, it's mental illness as well. But averages on global scale misportray the world. Then we can look at the outliers, like the poorest and the richest billion. Look how their picture looks different. Down in extreme poverty, the communicable infections and things like that is the major burden of disease and suffering, while up here in Norway and Sweden, hardly exist, right? Infections, we get rid of them very, very fast. And we're, by the way, all of us are vaccinated. But the majority of mankind live in between these two extremes. So the thinking of 2 worlds is the problem. In between, it looks like this. The 5 billion people are somewhere between that and that. And right here, they got their tuberculosis, and yes, they can have a treatment, but other diseases they cannot get treatment for because it costs too much. And that's why it's relevant for a pharmaceutical company, for example, to understand that here are 2 billion potential customers if we lower the price tag, right? Instead of saying, these can afford our medicine, and let's see if we can invent something new for them. And then you spend a lot of research money on trying to invent something that is hardly possible to invent because the health is so good up there, and you're missing this market. Someone else will take that market. Someone else will see it because they actually live in these countries. The problem is if you grow up in the richest billion, you're probably the most ignorant people in the world. It happens to be the same people who are highly educated. We're the least capable of understanding the world, and that's why we need to teach global full picture, like we do with geography. This is Madagascar, this is Africa. People haven't seen it, so they have to learn it with a big map, and those maps is what we're trying to create. So instead of developing and developed, we should use, like in Pokemon, we use levels, right? I started on level 1 like everyone else, but I played a lot the first weekend, and I reached all the way to level 3. Don't call me a level 3 person, right? Because right now I'm on level 3. I'm actually on 20 now. So I keep changing my level. So never label me or a country with the level they are on. And then understanding how life is on the other levels where we have never experienced reality, that is challenging. The third misconception is that the second misconception is the world is getting worse, right? What you just said before. This question, life expectancy in the world, for example. The correct answer is 70 years. Actually, in Korea, Canada, US, and Germany, more than chimpanzees got it right. These are the chimpanzees, right? In Japan and Sweden and Hungary, we were worse than chimpanzees. So this is a question where it's almost random. we choose to keep this question because the experts score worse than everyone else on it. Most countries are actually better than random, but the experts, like at the World Health Summit, scored worse than chimpanzees on this question. Because when you fill your head with a problem, the problem increases in your worldview. The worldview is an imaginary place, which is combined of every fact that hits your brain, right? And it can be absolutely distorted. And if you're an expert, you're probably more distorted than others. That's a very interesting finding. So in Norway, in general, pretty good. Just on par with the World Health Summit, right? Quite good. Not like Sweden, we are 4% better. That's within the uncertainty of the measuring, of course. Here in this room, I was very happy to see this number. You are just like Spain, right? Quite good, better than chimpanzees. So these kind of questions I usually remove from our set of questions because it's better than random. We try to keep focus on things where people are worse than random, where there is active misknowledge, okay? This is quite okay. You're actually you can get started now to reach 100 because you're on the right side of randomness, right? There is some knowledge. So looking at this other bubble chart, has the world gotten worse? This is the world of today: money, health, life expectancy, and income, okay? We don't have two worlds, you see, not two kinds of countries. Let's go back in history very quickly and see where the countries were 200 years ago. They are all gone. 200 years ago, there was not one single country on the health levels where we are today. I have to zoom out to even see them. Look, there they are. They are down on like 30 in life expectancy. There's no such country in the world today, not a single one. And since then, this change, we must show the children that they live in the world that is where you survive beyond 30, right? Look at this. This is what has happened during the last 200 years. Yeah, the colonial powers took lead, but then the others catched up pretty fast. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you've seen my father showing it, I think. Okay, and now the world looks like this. These are free tools available on our website. The question is, how are they going to be integrated in public education? This knowledge, how is it going to reach everyone? That is really challenging. When you ask people, is the world getting better or worse? These are the answers. And I don't know if, I don't have Norway in here, sorry, but it's like Sweden. 10% think the world is getting better. It's a very strange question. Is the world getting better or worse? I would say the people in the middle are those who are correct. They say, that's a silly question. I can't answer it. That's the right answer. It's both bad and better at the same time. The world is really bad in many ways, but it's getting better in general, right? So girls in school, for example, is up on 89%. This now next question that I asked is the trickiest one for Scandinavians because we love women's rights. So we score really worse than everyone else. So be prepared, right? Even in this room, I found ignorance, okay? So the question was, 30-year-old men went 10 years to school on average worldwide. So we framed the question with the men, you know, those who we fight against. And then we asked, so what about the women? And your love for gender equality make you pick, it feels bad to say 9 probably, you know, we're emotional beings. So this is the right answer then. Yeah, women on this planet, I got a daughter, I told her this. She scored perfect on these questions by now. But knowing that you grow up as a young woman in a world where the rest of the women have 9 years schooling on average and have catched up with men gives you a lot of hope. Then the other, I mean, why is it not 10 years? That's the question. But it's not so far behind. And this hope, the losing of hope, how can we cope with that? These are the answers. You see, Sweden is at the bottom in this one, almost like Spain and Belgium. And now I actually have Norwegian results for the first time here. But I also ask this, of course, to the journalists who are actively writing in Europe about gender equality. See how US is quite good. The Americans, 26%. You see, they are more like chimpanzees in US. That's why they score so good, okay? Better than their journalists. And the fact filmmakers score like this. At the World Health Summit, 16% picked the right answer. I mean, for a good reason, we're exaggerating the gender inequality. We just can't keep track of it in terms of facts. Our emotion takes over. And then, I mean, the difference in the answers, 9, 6, or 3 is an enormous difference in schooling, the length of schooling, right? And in Norway, this was a terrible result. I would say it's a measure of how much do you care for women's rights? A lot. So I will not pick number 9. You know, no way, I can't even trust your data. That's the reaction. In this room, we have a tendency to think like that, right? You know how terrible men are in the university in Oslo. I can imagine tons of stories about how men misbehave. But that doesn't change the global average of schooling for women. You can't extend that terrible experience to the rest of the world in that sense. And this is the learning, that keeping track of single facts is very, very difficult. So why I talk about the worldview is I don't want you to memorize single facts. It's the big picture that needs to change so that you do a better guessing. What guessing is legitimate, what works, and what guessing does not work. So you can kind of extend your knowledge in a reasonable way without knowing exact numbers. The third one, one of the least known things in the world, is the population. The driving force behind sustainable development discussion. How many people are we on Earth? And this is the chart showing where people live. Can you please just memorize it before I continue? Please memorize all the spikes. There is no way the human brain is a huge constraint in factual knowledge. Not even this nice picture we can remember. Some of you have photographic memory, maybe. No. Okay, so the rest of us who don't have photographic memory, we could maybe remember this one. 7 billion people in the world, where do they live? We divide the world into 4 equal size areas, and there's 1 billion in America, north and south together. I actually rounded the number with 200 million people. It's 800 million in America. But that's hard to remember, right? So 1 billion. Okay, now we got 1 billion there. 1 billion in Europe, East and West together, and then 1 billion in Africa. Easy, right? Where are the others living then? They live in Asia. That's where people live, right? They don't live up here in Alaska, Norway, Sweden, and places like this. Nobody wants to live here. This is where they live, and that's probably where they are going to live as well. So the PIN code of the world is 1114. Easy to remember, right? This you could remember. So this is one of the 12 fact questions where people constantly put 1 billion more in Africa because they hear about population in Africa. So they think there must be 2 billion. No, 1 billion on the wrong continent, right? That's not okay. If you're going to participate in a sustainable development discussion and you put 1 billion on the wrong continent, what kind of discussion is it we're going to have? It's going to be just emotional, right? Oh, I feel so scared, right? In the future, of course, PIN codes changed and we will have 5 billion in Asia and 2 billion in Africa by 2050, roughly. This is UN official numbers. So the West, you know, those colonial powers, we're going to be 8% of the world population. And if we put the United Nations headquarters there in custody, like, I don't think the others will care about UN at all. Because it's like our project, you know? We have to definitely change UN to be a global project to involve everybody. And this is everybody, right? 92%. It's not us. And we must start behaving. Because otherwise they're not going to invite us to the world trade discussions, which is going to happen here, because this will be the world trade ocean, right? We're quite far away from where things will happen. So we better start behaving. Okay. There are 2 billion children. Oh, there is an accident in my slide there. Oh, I don't like that. Well, no, let's fix it later. How many children will there be in the future? Today we have 2 billion. How many will there be in the future? Oh, the population is growing, so the number of children must be growing, right? That's very intuitive. But intuition is not made for facts, right? Korea, I was so impressed. In South Korea, 45% picked the right answer. Their population pyramid looks like this. Okay, so they have like a clue in their own country to extend to the global. That's probably why they picked the right answer. But more research is needed there to understand it. But most countries, only like 10 or 9% pick the right answer. So at the World Health Summit, they were just human beings, right? 2 billion increase, yeah, it must be more. So they say 3 or 4 billion in the world. And in Norway you got a lot of work to do in Norway. That's clear, right? 92% of people need this. There should be a way to get budget to public education, right? Look at this. Show them this. I can send you the slides. They are freely available on our website. They can show it to the ministers of education and say, there's a problem here, you know? We cannot brag about our knowledge society. This is not a knowledge society. This is an ignorance society. At this university, though, you're better than the public. You're almost like chimpanzees, right? You would, as a group, score better if you close your eyes and pick just A, B, or C on my questions, right? On these 2 last ones, at least. So it's hard to know which questions we should close our eyes on and which one to open the eyes. Self-criticism is probably more useful than source criticism. But that's more difficult. It's not so fun. It's more fun to point fingers. At the World Economic Forum, they didn't really laugh either. The video is up on stage, on YouTube. 26% picked the right answer to this question. Okay, the basis of the population pyramid is what determines the future population on Earth, right? And people have not heard that it has stopped growing. This is the right curve. This is official UN numbers because the number of children born on this planet every year is not increasing. And people talk about, have you heard people talk about sustainable development? A lot, right? And the population and overpopulation. No, they don't talk about population, they talk about overpopulation, which is, I don't know what it is. But they haven't heard about the core number. So what has happened? Well, across the world, before 1965, people had a lot of sex and had a lot of children, right? Then something happened. One of these two dropped. Okay, it wasn't sex, it was children. People kept having a lot of sex, but they talked about it. Like, what's the purpose of this, really? Why are we doing this? Do we need like 3 or 4 of those? How are we going to afford their education? Because these people left poverty behind and didn't need workforce on their fields any longer. So they didn't want many children. And fortunately, we had a sexual revolution and everybody started talking. Everybody started talking about sex. Look at this. In Europe, it came first, America second, and then came Asia, dropped really fast, and this is Africa now. This is like historic data up to today. And this is the drop that has started in Africa to follow the path of all the other cultures, religions, and continents where people are in their bedroom and they talk about sex, saying, yeah, let's have sex, but let's plan it a little bit before something goes wrong, you know? And that's what people do across the world, and that's what UN is expecting this to continue. Some are below 2 already, and others are above. So the number of babies are not increasing any longer. But how on earth can the world population keep increasing then? If the number of babies is not increasing, how is it even possible? Now you have to stretch your brain and think of possibilities. Well, then it's because people grow older, right? A lot of old people. And no, that's not the answer. So maybe spaceships will come with 3 billion grown-ups, and they just show up and we didn't see them coming because they come at night. This is the future projection. Look, the number of children is not expected to increase, but we're going to have 4 billion more adults. How is that possible? Scary, right? Where are they going to come from? Well, it's very simple. Imagine a house. Is this advanced visualizations? Let's ask that afterwards. It's not. It's simple education, right? You will understand the mechanism after seeing these slides. And it's very hard to say how it works. I haven't done, but it works. 7 billion people on different age floors in a house, right? Here are the children. They live at the bottom floor so they can go out and play. And then their parents are cooking here. There are 2 billion on each of these floors. But there on the grandpa's floor, it's only like 1, 2, 3, 1 on each. There are 3 people missing on these floors. So when these kids fall in love, become 15 years older, they visit their grandpa's funeral because the grandpa died. Then they grow 15 years older and they start having sex and they have 2 children each. 2 parents having 2 children, right? The number of children didn't grow. Now we're 8 billion. That's it. And we're going to be 3 billion more people because of this mechanism, which we call the fill-up. It didn't have a good name, so we invented fill-up. Like you have soda, and you pour in soda, and it's going to reach a top of your glass, and it's going to pour over, and there will not be more soda, even if you keep pouring in there, because it's like done. These guys are going to die, and it's going to stay at around 10 billion. That's how population. So when the number of children stop working, you should count on 4 billion more people, just because of the fill-up. 1 billion is already done, that's this one. We got 3 more billions to go before the fill-up stops. And it's no longer lives, right? It's not a longer life expectancy and it's not more children. It's just how demography works. You can probably do experiments at home if you got rabbits or something, but force them to only have 2. I don't know how to do that. But, I mean, it's just demography. But we have to teach this. Otherwise, because it's not intuitive until you've seen it, then it's intuitive. That's how knowledge works. This was not advanced visualization. It's something else. It's just finding out a way to explain something that people actually understand, which is not misleading. Okay, yes, there will be 1 billion more because of longer lives, but that's only 1 of 4. So if we don't improve survival in this world, we can skip that one. But the other 3 we cannot skip by stopping saving people, right? They will be there. These are the 3 mega misconceptions which we easily design questions for, so people score worse than random. because they are driven by a worldview which is divided, the majority are in poverty, the world is getting worse, and the world population just keeps growing out of control. If we can find one of these more, we can probably design 25 questions where people score worse than random. And then we fight that ignorance. It's very, very fun. You're very invited to work with us. These are the 12 questions across countries. How many scored 0 correct answers? 15% of people picked no correct answer out of 12 questions. 15% managed, they were completely fooled by their misconceptions, constantly picking the wrong answer on all 12 questions. Here is the rest of the distribution. It's difficult to see there at the end, like 11 and 12. So I highlighted how many people got 11 correct answers. 1. And nobody got 12 correct answers when we asked like 14,000 people. And then I heard the results from Norway. We might be adding 4 Norwegians here, but I doubt the data. I must check that survey because it's very, very high for being Norway. I mean, the rest. So this is 10% score better than random. A monkey would get 4 correct out of 12. 10% of people score better than random on these 12 questions ranging from everything to everything, right? Okay, so what is missing? A fact-based framework which you use to do your guessing, where you don't have a divided world. You get most of the people in the middle, in middle-income countries. That's where the majority lives. So we've constructed these. How much time do I have now? I wanted to... Is it like... Yes, okay, I just continue. That's a go. Okay. So why are people so wrong? Okay, we can never change this problem without understanding it. My father actually, usually, he got very angry. At least at the academics and the decision makers. Like, come on, check the facts. You're wrong. You know, he got really, really angry. And with journalists, he got extremely angry with them. My wife is smarter. She said, you know, that won't change much. They just get offended. And so there is something wrong in the system. There's something wrong in our knowledge system. So what knowledge system do we have? How do we learn about the rest of the world? Well, we'll look at the news, right? They look almost the same, all of them, right? Blue. And they show these pictures of terrible places, disasters, and then the conflicts. Oh, he looks so scary. I don't want to go there. The rest of the world is so scary. Can you see how scary the rest of the world is? That's the majority living in that extreme poverty, you know. Let's build a wall or something, because they're so strange. Even when they're happy, they are so strange. I can't understand these cultures, right? They look so, but they got the nice beaches. So how can we still collaborate with them? And by the way, we need to save the animals. They are over there, right? And ethnic minorities get enormous attention. Like, this is so non-representative. This is the ovanliga, this Swedish slide, the unusual. That's what we're watching from the rest of the world. We're watching the unusual. If you watch my unusual behavior, you would probably get a very strange picture of me as well, if you just cherry pick. So instead, using data to turn it into information and knowledge and wisdom, it needs effort. And that has not happened. Okay, so I assume we don't have a system for conveying data into wisdom. This is the first time in mankind's history that we got data about the development of the world. We never had that. There was never a way to check what is the right answer on a global scale. That is why the Ignorance Project can be run now. Today, data exists. That's the new thing. And then we happen to be a little family starting it. But there is a missing institution in our society that corrects misconceptions. Because misconceptions, they grow on trees. They are everywhere. It just takes a second to get a misconception. You fill your brain with exceptions. And that's what everybody's doing all the time. And nobody is guilty. It's just how the human mind works. And we need to understand that this results in misconception on a global scale, systematically across human beings. That's what we discovered. How to solve it? Yeah, we're going to try that as well. So, what are these dramatic stories we hear about? If you look in the news or an NGO magazine, something, it's going to be stories about gaps. The gaps are increasing, you know. You heard about it. Between the rich and the poor, the north and the south, the west and the east, whatever. Just increasing gap. It's a very good story, like Star Wars, the good and the bad, right? That's how stories are designed. But look for the majority. Where is the majority? Oh, they were in the middle. These were exceptions. Negativity. Things are getting worse. But we don't hear about the trend between the dips, right? When things were improving. In general, the trend is improving. Like with the war fatalities. There's less and less war, except for when there is a war. And we will not hear about the less and less because nobody pays attention there, right? So the exceptions, the lines are not just continuing like our intuition tells us. If I throw something at you, you got good intuition to see if it's going to hit you or not. That was built into your system. The checking of facts and mechanisms like the fill-up was not built into your system. We have to practice to do that. Like the curve of a newborn baby, look in the beginning, it's like this. But nobody believes that's just going to continue and the baby is going to be 10 meters tall, right? Because we know that that's not how humans grow. That's knowledge. We need the same kind of knowledge to understand demography. It will not just continue along a line, but intuitively we do the wrong conclusions. And then the fear, of course. As soon as your head is full of fear, like the Hindenburg, it was recorded on a picture. So everybody saw this disaster and heard about it, and then they canceled the whole industry of Zeppeliner ships. 4 years earlier, there was a larger disaster, with 4 times as many who died, and it wasn't captured on a photo. So for 4 years, the industry could continue until someone captured it on a photo. And this, half of the crew and people, staff, the passengers actually survived. But it's so fearful. It's so fearful that we must do something, we must make a decision. Let's cancel that whole industry. I will never fly with that ship. That's how the human mind works, and we need to teach our children that that's the machine they were born with. Importance, huge numbers you mentioned. Here's a huge number. This is a true number. 4,489,000 infants, it says, die every year in the world. You can close your eyes and imagine the UNICEF website where this number is the big number they put before the here is how you pay, right? That it works. It works. People cannot keep track of big numbers. So this was in 2016. That's very important. So when you hear these messages, this many die every year. No, which year? Because it changes. 2015 was this number. This is UNICEF data. Look, we should celebrate. Look how many, it's 100 million fewer children, 100,000 children fewer who die this year. That's what we should celebrate. And then wonder, okay, how can we continue this trend? Since 1950, when there were fewer people on Earth, that was the number in 1950, and suddenly the big numbers don't look big any longer, and our children need to learn this in school. How easy it is to fool someone with statistics by just switching the context. This is probably intentional when people do this with big numbers. You know, I need to get attention. Which number should we pick? Then we got the generalization problem. That what do we know about other people? These are 10 dramatic instincts that we have identified. Sorry, that's a duplicate of all my instinct slides. 1 second. That was unintentional. Here we are. Okay. So what do we see from other people when we see the exceptions? My brilliant wife said, okay, people hate statistics, so we can't really just use numbers and visualizations. It won't change their worldview because they will just fall asleep, right? And that is true, unfortunately. So we need to be smart, and she is smart. So she came up with Dollar Street. She said, imagine if everybody lived on one long street from the poorest over there to the richest over there, and everyone else is somewhere in between. What does it look like? That's statistics, but in a smart way. So we have now a website. I'm just going to showcase it very quickly with 500 homes from all over the world. And she sent photographers there. So the richest are to the right, the poorest to the left. So for example, here we got Haiti, a poor family in Haiti. How do they live? Go in there and visit their home, right? This is their home. And there you can read a little bit about it, but mainly you can look at the pictures. So we could look at anything in their home, say, for example, the front door. This is what the front door looks like. These are other front doors in America on different income levels. And you can clearly see the difference in living conditions. And there are not two groups, right? There are not two kinds of doors. Learn a little bit about the difference of this one. And the front door lock, for example, how does it look like? How do you lock the front door? And how does that look on different income level? This is security in your life and safety in your living conditions. And the question is how many zeros you have on your income. That will determine how the lock looks. It will not be determined by your culture or your religion. Everybody needs a lock. And if you got glasses, or you could afford them, probably you live over here, right? People up here need glasses. They got glasses. These guys bought cheap glasses, and these guys have no glasses. So understanding the world as a long income scale is way more relevant than trying to divide people into different cultures. So we designed this and asked, where do you live if you put 7 billion people on the road? Where do you live? We asked people in Sweden before showing them Dollar Street. And the kids in Swedish school said, this is me. I'm neither Bill Gates nor extreme poverty, so I'm probably in the middle. And they heard the word middle class, which you could also throw out the window or just in the garbage can. It means nothing, right? It's just a word that sounds fancy, but often it's not defined. No, they live there. We are the rich, okay? Kids, we are the rich. We don't have to suffer all these things the other people suffer. And that's why we also don't know anything about those different living standards. So showing what life is like in the richest and the poorest 20% in USA, look, they are at the top of the street, both the poorest, the single mom in US on welfare, she have her cutlery in this kind of box, and the richest have it in that kind of box. So allowing to compare, and then the middle in the US where most people live, these are their cutlery boxes and they have more. You see the knife there is really good. It's not so expensive, but it's a good knife. She doesn't have that kind. Well, she has the exactly same knife there, right? But it's in a different. So suddenly your curiosity about the world is awakened and you can start investigate instead of traveling as a backpacker to a Rastafari cafe and you don't learn anything, you know? Because going in there and looking at people's sinks, like 500 people's sinks, how are you going to see them unless we collect imagery and videos from all these places? And same in China then, differences within China, not to have a stereotype, so to kill the stereotypes about other cultures and countries. We can do that with images. Look at how they cook their food. Comparing then US and China, you see the play structure. Look identical in the rich China and the rich US. It's probably because both were made in China. So, right? And then at the bottom of the China hump, you see, so the poor in China and the middle in Nigeria, they have exactly the same ceiling. This is like 2 different continents and cultures and religions and everything. The same sofa, the same great, they're gonna eat rice with fish tonight. It looks identical. This whole building in our heads of cultures, the fairy tales in Disney saga with all the animals, like the bears and the foxes cannot communicate because they have different nature. This whole thing is really distracting when you're going to understand the world. Income, money is way more informative. Okay? This is how they cook. I go as a backpacker to Nigeria. I come home and show my family, I've seen the world. This is how they cook in Nigeria. That's their culture. Oh, I went to China and I found exactly the same picture of how they cook in China. No, it wasn't China or Nigeria. It was this income level. This is affordable. This is an affordable way to cook water. And you find it across the world on this income level. But if you grew up here, hearing fairy tales in National Geography about cultures, you think that's important. Because you haven't seen this. You have never been here. And that is challenging. We need to show this to our kids because they have the power in the world. So the destiny of other cultures, no, they change. They are changing and they are different. 2007, Polish women go to get an abortion in Stockholm and they can't afford it. In 1960, Swedish women went to the Catholic Poland to get their abortions and they couldn't afford it. Okay? The world is changing. What we think of as Swedish values completely change over just a couple of decades, and everybody just forget about it and think, oh, we always had these values, you know, and they always have the same values. So let me just jump over, the blame story, as soon as it fills your head, you can't really think any longer. Let me just, and this is a major challenge, like the meeting today, the discussion today, is there something we can do? When that question is in our head, we're not thinking descriptively. Right, we're not thinking clearly. Can I do something, at least something? Can I shout something to get people react because they're so passive in a world that needs us to save it? This is a very well-known fairy tale, like that we tell the kids, but then the whole growing up information society works this way. People just grab attention by urgency, right? It's now or never, the world will... Okay, so on the news we got this, everything is getting worse, the plastic bags will kill us all. This is kind of what news looks like, right? And the tobacco industry finally lost the case of cancer, right? And they were forced to put warning texts. And we can have this on the news. The news often makes things seem very alarming, right? Oh, yeah, keep calm. Remember that, right? In 2016, there was a new EU law saying that 65% of the cigarette package should have warning text on it, with an image and then also a link to where I can learn how to stop smoking, right? This is, the first time someone suggested that in tobacco meetings, people were probably laughing. It will never happen. Now it has happened. in most countries. I don't know how many, but across the world we got these because evidence showed that it's very, very bad to smoke. It kills a lot of people, and they didn't realize it before they bought the cigarettes. Having the same thing for news might be a better way than trying to find a single news reporter who did a bad fake news thingy, because that's an exception. The general problem is that the news are so selective. They don't give us a proportional worldview, right? So we have defined, and that's the book, it's a Bible-alike book because it has these like commandments. You should find a majority, how to stay calm with factfulness in your head, knowing that throughout my life, I will get so many stories trying to blame, say, Trump or whoever happens to be the one to blame right now, and the dangerous things and lines continuing. So learning these kind of experiences, I think actually behavioral experiments in school that every kid have seen, how easy it is to lie with statistic or get distorted by selective information. That is something that we need to design, and we're trying hard in schools. So we have defined a certificate with 12 questions. It's available on our website. We call it the Global Fact Certificate. It's the 12 questions we asked everywhere, where nobody gets it right the first test. If you pass the test, we say you got basic global facts, and you had to change your misconceptions or at least confront them. That's a starting point. Like a driving license for a factual discussion. Do you know these things before we start talking? So it's not just opinions. We're missing that in the public sector. I went to UNICEF and tested them, and as soon as they scored worse than chimpanzees, and I said, okay, you shouldn't be scaring people and using big numbers like this. But then how are we going to make them pay give us any donations? I mean, they're pretty reasonable in their communication recently. But the mindset is wrong. I told them that, no, your first question should be, is it okay to have UNICEF staff who score worse than chimpanzees? That's the first problem. You should first know the facts yourself. Then, if you strategically want to scare people, that's a second decision. We separate those two. But there is this tendency to not liking being called ignorant. Teachers working with children are quite good audience for this. They really want to be fact-based. We figured in Sweden. We also been in Germany and England. So now we're spreading this certificate and all the slides and all the tools for free and trying to make a movement to replace my father, not only with me and my wife, no, by all these teachers. This is Mikael and Olof. They are teachers we hired in the Gapminder Foundation. We asked for funding from IKEA Foundation, Gates Foundation, and others to pay their salary to go out and develop a material that can be used in real schools to reach the young generation. That's children. That's how we can reach children, to get this into curriculum, a fact-based worldview. The grown-ups in commercial sector or at universities, we need something like Svanenmärkning or a certificate on a yearly basis with questions that you will fail unless you learn something new, which you didn't know. So that's what we're turning Gapminder into, not just another lecturing round by Hans's son. No, something that is scalable and you can copy. So this is something I really invite you to do at the university. It's extremely helpful to us if you have an institution like Global Health where you can force everybody who is in that department or the peace research group. So I can put your brand on our website saying this group thought this was very useful, and then others will also want to be there, because then I can go to their lecture and say, oh, you're probably worse than chimpanzees because you haven't passed our certificate like these competitors do. So this game is a kind of a blame game that we're doing. It's the incentive to learn facts that we have figured. Shame. People feel so bad when they are worse than chimpanzees, and then they want to learn. So that's the end. Thank you very much. This is where we are now, and all the things I showed are freely available under Creative Commons license. Thank you very much.